Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous is an isometric RPG, which is based on the pen and paper tabletop RPG Pathfinder. In the Pathfinder universe, there are several planes of existence, and your character is dealing with a dangerous, mysterious rift between two of them. This rift is a huge problem because it allows chaotic evil beings to pour into the mortal world of Golarion. A crusade was formed just to try to contain them. The battle's not going well either, and it hasn't for a very long time. Why your character was chosen to fix this world wound, by who, and what shape your power takes is a story that is unraveled as the game continues onward. Because it's based on the Pathfinder system, the amount of choice you have when creating your character is vast. There are many different races and classes to choose from. Once you do choose one, then there are also many other variables to tweak, such as skills and feats to choose from. You'll also be able to pick more as you level up. For example, things such as which spells your character will have, which weapon they'll specialize in, if any, how much lore they know about their own world, or if they're any good at using magic devices. How the tale ends has a lot of variety too. This is because the game allows you to choose from one of 10 mythic power types. Every mythic path has at least one unique ending of its own, some have more than one unique ending, and there's a secret ending you can get if you meet its requirements. There are also a couple of generic endings which apply to every single path. Your story will vary depending on the path that you choose, but the core story does remain mostly the same no matter what you pick. Occasionally, you will be given the ability to do something that only someone on your chosen path can do in the main story or during a quest. However, these choices are not as frequent as one might expect or enjoy. I chose Trickster for my playthrough, and I was often disappointed by not being able to act in the clever or tricksy ways that my path sometimes allowed for. The moments that I could do tricksy things were cool, but they just weren't common. Where the uniqueness in a path comes in is really in what you get added to your playthrough, and in how the story finally ends. For example, as a trickster, I was able to get unique abilities, and I could influence my crusade in similar ways. I also was able to choose from one of 3 unique endings for the Rift, unavailable to the other paths. I spoke to some NPCs that I otherwise could not have spoken to, hitched a ride that others couldn't get, made a drunk powerful, and was able to fight someone inside of a pocket dimension. If I wanted to, then I also could have joined up with an interesting entity at the end. Other paths offer similar extras and bonuses, and although the Trickster path doesn't offer this, it's worth noting that several paths do provide you with unique path-exclusive companions. As for my thoughts on all of this, there were moments during the game that I absolutely adored. These good moments were scattered across the game here and there. Some happened on the Trickster path, others occurred during set side quests, and the main story itself had some good moments too. Points where I cared about outcomes, where I was interested, and where it could also make me laugh. The story at these points was very engaging and very well written. The good in the game was enough to get me to finish it because I greatly enjoyed when it was good. I wanted to find as many good points as I could because they were fantastic. However, often the game was a slog to get through instead of fun. My overall impression was that in an attempt to give players many mythic flavors and a huge amount of playtime, the devs overreached. It seemed to me that the game's story became a classic case of quantity over quality. It had epic scope, but not epic depth, and the quality control was poor. The Trickster path was frequently lacking, and based on what I looked into, other paths have the same sorts of problems. Each path seems to be decently flawed, with good moments mixed in. Meanwhile, the main story has several issues too, and so do the normal side quests. I think having fewer mythic paths and focusing on fixing the problems with the ones kept would have made this a much better game story-wise. Like I said, the good moments were great. The game felt awesome to play when it was being good, but by the end, bad writing outweighed the good writing by far. Now that I know very well how it goes, what the side quests are like, and how long it takes to really get into the game and finish companion quests and all that, I wouldn't play it again to experience the other mythic paths. I did look them up online to know how they go and learn how they differ. The bulk of what I'd need to redo would just feel pointlessly repetitive and unfun. And I think that's a shame, because I think that replayability should be a major draw in a game game with so many different flavors of mythic powers, it feels like a missed opportunity, because while there are different routes to take, the game still needs to be concise and brilliant enough in its writing and gameplay if it's going to be worth re-experiencing again and again. That level of quality requires polished writing, attention to detail. Unfortunately, the game often lacks both of these things. There will be some spoilers here because they're unavoidable. I'm not going to spoil anything gigantic. I don't want to spoil an ending or anything like that, but I am going to say what happens with Queen Galfrey at the end of Chapter 3, which is a core story point. Otherwise, to avoid spoilers, I'm going to only vaguely cover a companion questline, a side quest, world-building issues, and problems with the ending slides. The bad. Core story. A lampshaded tantrum. A big plot point happens when a major figure harms you and risks ruining the entire crusade out of a random fit of jealousy that doesn't fit either the character or the situation at hand. Basically, before that point, Queen Galfrey was a very religious, calm, composed person. She was obsessed with maintaining an image of decorum and grace. She's 100 years old but kept youthful by sun orchid elixirs. While she's pompous and very set in her ways, she's also wise to a degree and very stoic. A huge part of this is in her paladin-like obsession with duty. She's a well-written, established character by the end of Chapter 3, so you think she'd be thrilled when success appears and renews her hope and victory for her side over the world wound. Instead, random jealousy and hysteria pops up. She's suddenly super mad you're doing well. Plus, this image-obsessed person wasn't expressing her anger with any refinement or class. Throwing a public, stupid, and obviously disgraceful tantrum in front of a small crowd of highly influential people was against her entire portrayal thus far. Worse yet, her behavior is even called out as stupid by someone incredibly important to this person's religion, the goddess's own herald, and he's normally greatly respected by Galfrey. But instead of her normal respect appearing, her childishness only amplifies, and she even directs it at him. This means that all signs of her paladin-like obsession with duty and her subservience to her religion are wiped away at random to fit this moment. And it all seems like it's just done to push the plot along. It feels so fake. Having a character randomly act bananas to push along a plot is often a bad choice in and of itself, and this case was no different. It's just bad writing, especially since better reasons and circumstances could have been easily crafted, which only underlines how sloppy this moment was. For example, at this point, everyone's near the abyss. It's known for having a corrupting influence. Galfrey, although she hasn't been on the front lines, has been fighting it for over 100 years, which means she's had a decent amount of contact with corrupted things. A unique source of corruption, some sort of demon trap set for Galfrey, could have temporarily warped her usual judgment. It makes sense in context too, because in-game there are several comments about how the demons would love to kill her specifically because Galfrey's a living symbol of the crusade against them. This means that the build-up's done, the work's been done. You just have to build on it. So where she has the tantrum, near demonic statues and a rift to the abyss, could have triggered some sort of final part of a demonic plan. A slow build-up and reveal could have made this an epic moment too. It wouldn't have taken much to accomplish this tweak. Instead, her tantrum was just a lame plot device. A stoic 100-year-old ruler suddenly throwing a tantrum that a 10-year-old might throw. Later on, the game also tries to lampshade this problem of out-of-character behavior from Galfrey, which only makes it even worse. Lampshading isn't a great technique to cover up flaws in writing. It's important to note that my point here isn't that this one moment with Galfrey is bad. My point is that her abrupt character destruction is a good example of what can go wrong in the game's writing. Plus, there are also many other problems that arise when a moment of bad writing happens. This is because important details do become established, but then they get forgotten by the game later on. It's often pretty sloppy. For example, by ordering you to run off into the abyss, Galfrey condemns your party along with you. Your party can include Darren, who is her only living relative. Beforehand, it was established that her biggest complaint about him was that he hadn't helped the forces of good enough in his life. Yet, she cared about him anyway, since he was family. At this point in the game, when she's condemning him, he had helped the forces of good under her orders, and victories had been achieved, major ones. She should be more pleased with him, yet now he gets a casual command to go die and and it's not even one that's targeted at him directly. What makes this very bizarre is that, again, this was an easily fixable problem in the writing. It'd also be a perfect moment to add depth to the characters, which makes it a missed opportunity as well. There were several ways where what was already established in the writing could have been further supported, yet it was undermined. Plus, if your chosen route means you can speak with Galfrey again later on, then the problem of her forgetting her own fondness for her cousin continues. He makes a snarky comment about being cousins, to underline their family connection since it hurt him that she didn't care if he died. She only begrudgingly nods at him, but that means she's meaner to him now than she was before, meaner to him when he's helping people than when he was wilding out across Golarion and embarrassing her. It makes no sense. And again, this isn't the only such situation like that. As I said, the writing's sloppy. Frequently, a moment will seem relevant and important, and then be either contradicted or diminished by the writing later on. It's all over the game. The bad. Companions. The case of the railroad necklace. Camelia's backstory is reliant on claims, which she makes about her necklace. Yet there are no ways to reveal what's actually up with that item other than by going through her quest line. If you want the truth about her for sure, then you have to put up with a lot. Depending on how you want to roleplay your character, putting up with certain things in her side quest might be intolerable. However, her quest info tries to make the player feel as if trusting her claims or not is a hard, weighty decision at all times. I found this to be incredibly lame and railroading for several reasons. When it comes to skills, the main character can identify magical items and spells if they have a high Arcana skill. Perception also can let the player notice key details at a distance. My PC was always identifying whatever magical items the party found, and also had high perception. Whether or not Camelia was telling the truth about her necklace should have been easily verifiable. Plus, when it comes to common sense, then it's obvious that Camelia has to sleep sometime. There's even a sleep spell. Being unable to ever thoroughly examine her necklace for months on end in game and relying on her words alone seems ridiculous to me. But the worst part comes in how the game randomly railroads the player by circumventing its own rules just to hide Camelia's secret. How it does this is through its death mechanics. If Camelia dies in combat, then you can resurrect her just the same as you can resurrect other companions. However, a companion's death normally results in their body turning into a yellow lootable container. Even after death in combat, you still can't remove her necklace. Her body also doesn't turn into a yellow lootable container either, and there's no reason for her unique death settings in the game. It's only a metagaming mechanic meant to force ignorance onto the player. That this is BS is underlined by the fact that it is possible to loot the necklace if you choose to tell Camelia that you no longer want her in your party and then kill her. The BS train doesn't stop there though, because even if you finally do get the necklace in that way, then the game still tries to illogically keep her secret from you. The companion quest info will end on an ambiguously worded note. The bad. Side quest. Let a dangerous village grow. In a zone called Chili Creek, you can find out the truth about why creepy dolls are being hung up around the village. However, once you learn the truth about why, only 2 NPCs from the village will give you new dialogue and interactions. The other NPCs in town just stand around and are completely irrelevant. Being unable to address what happened to this entire village and just leaving the villagers there seemed dumb in context. It was even underlined to the player that unless something was done, this place was going to be a definite problem in the future if it was left alone. It seems very much like something should be done, yet you can't do anything. Plus, a named NPC also dies in front of you in dramatic fashion, but given that resurrection and healing scrolls exist, this is very lame in context. The game even notes that he's not dead.
This thing refuses to cooperate.
I know that this has happened in past games, but I mean, come on, this isn't Final Fantasy VII or some other old game. By now, I think writers should be able to incorporate their own world's magical healing into the plot in a sensible, better way. The bad. World building or not. The setting itself has many major problems, which happen throughout the game. I'll list 3 quick ones. 1. I saved unnamed NPCs during battles when they joined in or were under attack, but saving them didn't matter at all. They might as well have died. Only NPCs who popped back up after fights ended really mattered. These poppers were usually random folks who weren't very influential on the game, but at least had names. Sometimes enchanted NPCs could also be encountered, however, even if their enchanters were killed, their spells were never going to wear off. These guys just had to be slaughtered no matter what. There was zero creativity allowed, such as using a sleep spell to let them sleep it off. This didn't fit with the world's magic setting, and it was also disappointing in how rigid handling them had to be. It felt more like Hulk smash than let's roleplay. These casual methods of how to treat unnamed randos made scripted emotional events involving them feel worthless, and that was the main problem because the game has several such moments where you're suddenly supposed to care about unnamed NPCs. Needing to randomly care isn't great writing. This is because there's no emotional consistency if they're mattering on and off, and scripted moments where they should be saved are just gonna feel, well, scripted. They're not gonna feel like there's any kind of tension or weight. As it stood, I just wound up seeing the common folks as useless fodder and only cared if they had a name, like with Vi the bartender. Names gave me a sense of, oh, that one's supposed to be a person, instead of a weighty sense that I was in charge of protecting everybody. That's pretty weak. 2. Companions often don't react when they should. Sometimes they have great reactions and even play off of each other. However, it's more common that they're silent. For example, I sometimes took Ember along since she's an incredibly caring companion, and I wanted to see her empathize with certain events, but she'd stay uncharacteristically silent. 3. The game often forgets what you've done in the writing, which I mentioned earlier, and this sometimes affects side quests. For example, I saved an NPC from a curse. He was fine, and I knew he'd been blackmailed with a curse. Everything was good, we were cool. Later on, shortly after facing the blackmailer, he suddenly attacked me. The game thought he was still in danger from the curse, and thus ready to stop me to save himself. The bad endings, wrong slides. 1. I didn't destroy a piece of tech, but then the ending slide falsely claimed that I had harmed my people with it. I never used it. This was an obvious glitch because to use it, you have to research it. It was never researched in my playthrough. 2. There's a certain item which can give you a creepy ending if you have it in your inventory at the end of the game. This happens even if you don't use it at all. I didn't get this ending slide because I got the secret ending, which made the item moot. However, I found out about it later when looking into the game's other endings, and I think this trap is a cheap gotcha kind of move. After all, the game gives you no option to destroy this dangerous item. Then an ending slide acts as if holding onto it was foolish. That makes no sense, as it seems way more foolish to leave it intact where you found it, drop such an item at random somewhere, or to sell it to an innocent vendor. Yet those are the only ways to be rid of it. If it's truly as dangerous as the ending slide suggests, then it'd be akin to the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. Leaving something like that somewhere, or selling it to a vendor, would be a dumb idea. Plus, when no other tremendously dangerous item in the game has this sort of gotcha potential, then having a single inventory item you shouldn't keep seems forced, especially since normally you can research incredible items of great renown and danger. When everything else is consequence-free to keep, a trap card in your inventory that auto-activates endgame is lame in context. Also, on the Trickster path, this twist of a trap item is even worse in context. This is because on the Trickster path, you can warp a very similar item with ease. This makes the ability to suddenly get lol tricked by the same kind of item a very weakly written moment because you would have already subverted an identical trick. Plus, whenever these happen in a finale, I think that's a little worse because it undermines whatever the players achieved, and in a game this long, that's rather disappointing. The good in the story. As I mentioned earlier, the game does have many good moments. Many of these rely on slow build-ups and excellent characterization. For instance, there's a cool moment where you get to see the inner desires of your companions. I could show it here, but I don't think it'd be as good out of context because the fun comes in having gotten to know the companions and then seeing their inner desires. Without knowing their personalities beforehand, through dialogue as you play here and there, the moment just doesn't hit the same. I think that's good writing. It builds up the characters in believable ways and then uses that to make a great moment. How it's revealed is also well done. When you get to see their inner desires, you're in a mysterious place where you don't know quite what you're about to witness, and that ups the tension, which makes what you do see even better. And as I said earlier, companions' random reactions are fun to see, and I think they should have happened more consistently throughout the game's events. Sometimes even small, random bits of writing are funny, such as this book I found in game, which made me chuckle. Some major plot points are good too. For instance, you do get to find out about the game's major villain and motivations for doing what they did. I thought that the villain was interesting. I got the secret ending, and I liked it. Many other endings are also decent, and I did like the trickster path. It allowed me to do things which were both clever and made sense. At points it was wacky, but for the most part, it just allowed for cleverness. I would have liked to see more trickster dialogue choices for that reason. They were likable choices. I don't want to give many spoilers since there aren't many such choices, and so I think the earlier example with Kyoto shows this point well enough. The gameplay. Because the story isn't concise, the gameplay suffers as well. I played on core difficulty, but what this does is raise the number of enemies and make them tougher to defeat. For a while, this is a fun challenge, but over dozens of hours, fighting the same enemies over and over again loses its appeal. This is because how to defeat them is well known after a while and easy to achieve since the enemies don't vary much. A well-placed dismissal spell, a polymorph spell, ability damage, you learn what works and for what. Rinse and repeat is only entertaining for so long on its own. Story mode's helpful to speed things up because it kills enemies almost instantly. Even a quick fight on core doesn't have such fluidity. Story mode is like flicking something with your fingers real fast versus core mode's going into menus and keeping on helpful spells as you fight. Plus, the difficulty can be ramped back up as desired, such as if new enemies are encountered or for the boss fights. When I began to get bored, then I put that mode on here and there for the boring, usual enemies I'd encountered dozens and dozens of times prior. Otherwise, I kept it on core to keep interesting fights interesting, like a mini-boss, boss, or new enemy. According to How Long to Beat, the average length of doing the main story plus extras is almost 140 hours, and it can go longer if you take it leisurely like I did. I would have preferred fewer hours of mandatory repetitive fights and fewer zones with little in them. I think a 140-hour game can be great, but not if it's mostly repetition and it's meant to be replayable with different paths. I'd rather it take me something like 40 to 60 hours to explore thoroughly, and then I'd replay a different path, since I wouldn't be sick of doing repetition. There's a limit to my patience, and that limit is why I don't plan on playing the different paths. If it weren't such an unstreamlined game, then I might try them out. It also suffers from balance issues, which are often irritating surprises. It's not a question of difficulty, but a question of why so-and-so is suddenly so powerful compared to somebody else. For example, there's a demon general near the end of the game who kept getting through all of my character's protections with hard-hitting spells. The fight was a difficult one since on top of his power, I kept rolling badly when it came to hitting him. As a result of both factors, I took down notorious demon lords with greater ease than this general. That shouldn't have been the case, and it felt odd in context. Plus, when named NPCs join your side for a battle, then these supposedly powerful helpers are incredibly weak. For example, a certain demon lord helped fight that aforementioned general with me. The demon lord went down like a gnat. To have that supposedly helpful demon lord built up in the story as being incredibly powerful, and then watch him go down in a couple of hits, was stupid. If named NPCs join in fights and they're supposedly powerful, then I think it's lame if the gameplay has them be as weak as a helpless child. The game also suffers from many glitches. I'll show some here.
Bella leads me.
Esmo, Axe, yes!
I'm out. Tread lightly.
Begone, fiend!
Team, cross.
This is not my time yet.
There are also mistakes with other things too. For example, some trickster-only summons will attack everything, including you, and some will only attack your enemies. This is supposed to be clear through the spell's descriptions, either noting a summon attacks its enemies or your enemies. However, with the Perturbed Wizard, the spell's description says he attacks your enemies, and he doesn't. He attacks everyone, he's hostile, which is why he has a red circle when summoned. So while it's a funny spell, it has a typo that wasn't addressed and makes it seem safer to cast than it is. As for exploration, it's okay, but many zones have little in them. However, looking in them is necessary if you want to gather elven notes to help the storyteller, a character who was also in the last game, Pathfinder Kingmaker. Unless you use a guide to know where to look, then you'd have to look everywhere in the game to be sure you can find at least 19 of the 20 pages he needs, or else you'd risk failing his quest and knowing his backstory in full. Since his backstory wasn't revealed in Pathfinder Kingmaker, I imagine that many players of that game would be curious about him. Looking around for dozens of hours but failing his quest if you missed looking in a few random spots isn't exactly a great fun feature, especially in a very long game where many zones are bland and most containers have gold and common items which aren't really worth looking into. The game is sometimes annoying in what it requires, and unfortunately that's not limited to the storyteller's quest pushing for extreme exploration over the course of the entire game. For example, for the secret ending, one requirement is that you have to look at a point, notice a noise, and then go back to it later on after something seemingly unrelated happens. If you do return, then an NPC appears. The noise you heard was this NPC. Now that they're out, you must speak to them to get info. If you fail doing this, you fail at getting the secret ending. It is a mandatory requirement. And I think this is a bad requirement, since doing it is mandatory for an ending, but repeated attention to interactable spots is not required in the game otherwise. Meanwhile, given the game's bugs, a player would basically be punished if they constantly gave the game this much attention. It'd just be a frustrating waste of time, because seemingly interesting things are everywhere, but often pointless or flat-out bugs. So, such a gameplay requirement to double back is highly flawed in what it expects of the player. For instance, the game has a polymorph spell. The polymorph spell turns the selected target into a dog. It's a curse, and at one point in Druzen, you can find a talking dog that's neutral. NPCs in town are supposed to be green, which means friendly, and it also means they're untargetable by most spells. Quite logically, I thought that this meant the dog was a polymorph person. I felt excited by the find. This was unique. I used Dispel, and the dog went hostile. This made no sense to me because Dispel isn't an aggressive action, and if there are no spells on the target, which there weren't, then I didn't do anything at all to the dog by casting Dispel magic on it anyway. I tried other approaches, but no matter what I did, it seemed that I couldn't figure out a puzzle which was meant to be solved. I had hesitated in looking this up online because I wanted to figure it out for myself. I thought I found a cool thing. When I finally did look it up, I learned that it didn't mean a thing. The dog not being green like every other NPC in town was just a glitch. It had dialogue which was meant to amuse people on the trickster path, which played once, and that was all there was to this. I brought that up because in context, it really underlines what the game expects is spoiled by its flaws. After all, a random talking animal that has a unique disposition to the player, which is also in the polymorph spell's only shape, seems to be put there in the hope of a player noticing and interacting with it, yet it means absolutely nothing. Something like that, compared to a random little note about hearing a noise, seems much more likely to yield a result, which I think underlines the ridiculousness of that requirement to double back and check a little magnifying glass. When the game is very long and has many such problems, then looking into things becomes more of a sense of disappointment than fun. And again, this is a common problem. There are many other requirements in the game for various quests which seem to lack sense. For instance, one companion has a romance path boost, which requires that the player assume that a gift of personalized jewelry needs to be used elsewhere. This also requires the player, who's in the middle of leading a crusade against chaotic evil incarnate, to travel through hostile territory for 2 days just to see if the shape of the jewelry mattered. The romance interest who gave the jewelry to the player character must also be present to access the zone, which you'd think would be an awkward moment, traveling for about 2 days together through deadly monster-infested territory just to unlock a hidden box somewhere else. Yet, even when you find what he wanted you to find, this romance interest has no comment on this. He only remarks later that he's glad you put in the effort and believes it showed you care. By the way, there are 6 other romances possible in the game too. They all have their own upsides and downsides. You can romance them as any race, but must be male for Social and Camellia, and female for Lamb. How those romances can turn out vary according to your chosen mythic path. Some are not compatible with this romance feature. Otherwise, there's the Crusade mode, ruling choices, and some puzzles. The Crusade mode has you fighting random demon armies. You can set it to auto-resolve, but I didn't do that since I found that handling such things in games often goes better if I just do it myself. Demon armies were easy to wipe out and then rarely respawned anyways, so it was pretty easy. Your units do damage and sometimes have abilities such as healing or magic missile. An army's general has spells and abilities which can be used once per round to help the troops, or more if you take certain traits as they level up. The Crusade mode was slightly easy for me because you can also build things to help with the Crusade fights, and I did. It's a simple system, but it will give your units and generals decent bonuses. There's not much depth to it. The best part though is that you can set up teleportation circles to fast travel your PC's party between points. As the commander, you also rule over the area and make choices regarding it. These choices pop up at random, and you can set them in motion by clicking your desired choices. You also can do research in the same way, improve your forces, and get unique items by making improvements to special gear that you find. There are also puzzles scattered throughout the game, but I didn't enjoy the puzzles. They consisted of pushing buttons, matching tiles, things like that. I don't think anything with a puzzle mechanic was particularly memorable or noteworthy. Graphics. My computer crashed when I had everything turned up high. I'd play for a few hours, and then it'd overheat, crash, and need to cool down before I could even turn it on again. I've got a good setup, my drivers are all kept updated, and so this shouldn't have happened. When looking into the issue, I found out that this was not an isolated problem. Many others have had it too, and that's really not good. Alcat had similar problems with Kingmaker. I didn't want to risk my computer getting damaged through extreme heat, but I did want to finish the game I'd started, so instead of just playing it and reporting crashes, I did what troubleshooting I could, and I was able to get it to work. I did so by both turning down the game's graphics settings and by capping the frame rate to a max of 60 FPS. After that, the problem stopped with one exception. The exception happened after several hours of play and during a ridiculously huge battle in real time when tons of spells were going off at once between my party's summons, and many high-level enemies on core mode. Otherwise, the graphics looked fine for the most part. The biggest issue was with the camera. It frequently had issues when there were multiple heights in a scene, such as mountains or buildings nearby. The camera would zoom closely in and then zoom far back out at random. A smaller issue was with clipping. It can look weird at points. But, like I said, the game looks fine for the most part. It looks standard for a quality, isometric game. However, I'm very displeased at how it could cause crashes so easily. It seems to be a common problem, and that the game needed further bug testing before release. It seems that, again, this is a symptom of having tried to put so much of an epic scope into the game and not focusing on quality control instead of quantity. The sound. The soundtrack is lovely and definitely heightens the game's atmosphere. It has 74 different tracks and it's 2 hours and 22 minutes long. I enjoyed it. The voice acting is pretty good. Occasionally a line doesn't sound great, but most of them are on point. There was only one voice which I disliked. I wasn't a fan of a secret companion's voice, as his low, growling tone sounded very fake to me. Otherwise, I enjoyed the voice acting. The random sound effects were fine, they blended in well. There's not much to say on that, I think, other than it's well done. Final thoughts. I think it's a disappointing journey, but one with some good moments and an okay set of ending choices. I looked into other paths via other players' videos and forum posts, and it seems to me like other paths have similar problems, and this is why I think it could have been a much better game if it had less breadth and more depth. I think the devs likely overreached in trying to please with a variety of mythic paths, and simply had neither the time nor resources to perfect what they'd created. I see this as a shame because I think the whole point of having many paths would be to add replayability value to the game. Yet, when the paths are so flawed, then I think replay is only going to be worth it for a very small amount of the game's player base. I can understand why many people don't bother to finish the entire game even once, because at points, I almost gave up on it. The main story has a lot of issues, and so do many of the standard quests. I can also understand why even fewer people want to replay the game to try a new path for those reasons, let alone decide to go through all of the paths, because, well, I'm in that camp. As for the DLC, I did do Treasure of the Midnight Isles during my playthrough. I only recommend playing through that DLC if you really enjoy the combat and want more of it. I had been hoping that the story would be worth it, but it wasn't worth it to me. But on a funny side note, this DLC also gave me so much gold from selling dropped items that it made central plotline issues about scarcity in the world wound seem laughable. I had millions of gold, but could only use it to buy buildings and not food and other supplies for my troops. Despite imports being demonstrably possible, such as when somebody sent me a constant stream of roses. After all, as a ruler with desperate troops, if I was that flush with cash and my life was hanging in the balance, then I think I would have invested in some food storage with my own funds, if the option had ever been given to me. I mention this because I do think it was some weirdness. It meant that while the DLC didn't enhance the main story, it did make it a twinge awkward plot-wise, but I thought it was funny.
So be it.